بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, we commend in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, send salutations of prayers and peace upon the finality of prophets and messengers, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, upon his family, his companions, and all who follow him in righteousness until the day of judgment. We are on another episode of Abu Sumayya's Corner. It's been a while, it's been a minute, alhamdulillah. But with the new happenings of what has occurred in New Zealand, the tragedy of the 50 deaths due to the terrorist act, alhamdulillah, and the racism and the white supremacism that has occurred there in New Zealand, mashallah, we have our brother Yusuf ibn Todd, alhamdulillah, who used to be a skinhead, mashallah, and then he accepted Islam. Alhamdulillah, so we thought it would be nice to bring him onto the show, ask him some questions about how he became Muslim, after being a skinhead, what drove him to Islam, and then we'll get into talking about New Zealand and some of the white supremacy movement and how as Muslims we should be looking at that, especially gaining knowledge from people who've been there, right? Gaining knowledge from people who've been there, because people like myself, being Latino, I have no idea, right? I've never been a skinhead, I haven't been around them. And if I would have been around him, I probably would have been here today, right? Yep. So, alhamdulillah, it's important, Islamically it's important, getting knowledge right from the foundation, from the source itself, alhamdulillah, and this is why we got Brother Yusuf, inshallah, here. So, Yusuf, man, inshallah, give us a little bit of information about yourself. Tell us about, who you are, how you came to, tell us a little bit about your past prior to Islam, inshallah ta'ala, and being a skinhead, and then we'll get into the whole Islam after that, inshallah.
Naam, inshallah. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yeah, my name is Yusuf Abdul Latif. My father's name was Todd. I had the Ibn Todd, Kunya Abu Mu'adh. Alhamdulillah, I was born in the early 70s, 1971 to be exact. My parents were from the militant 60s, you had during the 60s, you had, in amongst white people, you had like two kind of ideals. You had the hippies, which were like the real peaceful flower children. Then you had those who were amongst the militant branch, which were the yippies. So you had people who came out of that, such as the Weather Underground. You had people like Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, et cetera, et cetera. And so these were white militants that were also, they were in alliance with the Panthers. So, if you read the stories about in Chicago, Abby Hoffman was arrested along with, with Bobby Seale and so on and so forth. So my mother and my father came from that mindset, from that era of, being, militant in mindset. There's things that I don't really know about my father that he might have been involved in, and it's a kind of like a mystery. One day I'm gonna have to look at this, but that they came from that very anti-racist mindset, against Vietnam, against the segregation and the the racism of the South, and of course in the North as well. So my mother and father, they were together. There was quite an age difference. She was 13 years younger than my father. And so they had me, they got married, they had me, and they were together for a few years, not too long. And then my mother left, and then she met my stepfather, who was African American. So this was 74. So needless to say, I don't have to say what interracial relationships were in that era. They had to fight on this side and that side, and so much so on my mother's side, my mother's family were, Italian Irish. So they basically disowned her. So they basically let, she kind of went into like a hiding sense, because there was even stories about how certain family members wanted to kill my stepfather. So I was, blessed to be raised in that environment, to be, have my father. I had my father for some time, and then my growing up with my mother and my stepfather. So it gave me a very unique experience on life. It's like, most white people, when they grow up with, they have black friends, or they'll live in the black neighborhood, but they're not have a black family. So it's a different thing. So then, so during the week I lived, with my mother and stepfather, and on the weekends I lived with my father. And, being my father the way he was very supportive in their relationship as well. He wasn't like, because that was the uniqueness of my father too. Never, when everybody said something racist, he would attack them. He would come at them, and that was the uniqueness of a man who was born in the 40s. So, I had that mindset growing up, being, with having my father, my mother's mindset, and my stepfather. So we lived, for some time. It was just me and my mother and stepfather, and we lived, from neighborhood to neighborhood. And I could recall, I was told one story about how we lived in this one area of Long Island called Babylon, and that when we lived there, that the landlord painted the steps white and black, the kind of like as a slight towards them. Oh, wow. So then we left, and then we moved to other areas. Then we moved to this place called West Islip, which is commonly known on Long Island as White Islip. We lived there, and basically we got ran out of town because, this was in like around 78. So then we moved to an area predominantly African-American neighborhood, North Amityville on Long Island. And that's where I basically grew up, I had my really like forming, years up until end of 9th grade. And so I was, I grew up there, it was the sole little white boy, you know what I'm saying? And, you get a little problems here and there, but nothing major, Once they saw who my family was and that I was part of the neighborhood, I was accepted. And then so really my transformation, I look at, turning points in my life, my where my transformation, I could see where it began was the death of my father in 1985. My father was suffering through cancer, and he had cancer, some sort of bone cancer, I believe, and they amputated his leg, but it did not help. It spread. And so in April of 1985, he passed away up in a hospice in the Bronx, New York. And then not too long after that, about a year plus, we decided to move. What it was every summer I went down to Florida to visit my family down there. That was kind of like my thing my grandmother did. So summer of 86, my mother calls me and says, look, we're moving to Florida. And this was due to my stepfather having a very bad drug problem because the crack epidemic was huge at that time, around the country. So we thought, let's go to Florida, but drugs are everywhere. So we moved to Florida, and I was happy because I wanted to live there, but really unbeknownst to me was that it was a whole different environment. Here I was where I grew up and went to school. Everybody got along for the most part. Real quick incident, where there was a situation where a white girl supposedly got robbed by another, black kid. And it was going to be a little racial strife at my school up in New York on Long Island. And so it was funny, one day some of the kids and the white kids said, well, at that time I was known as Jeremy. They're like, well, who are you going to be with? I said, man, I'm from North Amityville, man. I don't know about y'all. I said, I live here. These are my people. And so, that was my mentality at the time. But when I got down to Florida, it was a whole different thing. It was like walking into a prison. And that's the only way I could ever describe it. When I walked into that hallway, all the black people were here, all the Latinos were here, all the whites were here. Nobody really interacted. Yeah, it was like really nobody interacted. I mean, people talk. If they played sports together, they spoke. If they were in class together, they spoke, but they didn't hang out. It was kind of like you didn't hang out. So here I am. I'm from Long Island, and grew up a certain way. And I'm like, man, what do I do? I don't know about this. It's a whole different mentality. It's the South. Segregation kind of just probably ended maybe a decade before. This is 1986. So, trying to fit my way in, trying to meet people and so on and so forth, it was kind of difficult. And at that time, I was what you would call a metalhead. I had long hair, but I cut it off at that time, but I was growing it back. And at that time, I was going through like a very rebellious thing. Once again, I'm rebellious, I'm angry, I'm just angry, And so I'm listening to like death metal, black metal, something that's satanic. I'm drawing the images because it's shocking. You want to shock people. You want to draw a pentagram. You want to draw an upside down cross. You want to draw a Baphomet, the goat's head and the star. You want to do that because you want to be, but you don't believe it. You just want to be, you're going through that rebellious age. But when I was down there, I got more introduced to different kinds of music, specifically like punk rock and hardcore, which is a derivative of punk rock, but it's just faster and more gritty and more street. And so I kind of get into that. And so in the end of the school year of 10th grade, I got more and more into that. That summer I cut my hair, I shaved my head. I still had like a little bit of long hair in the back, but I was going towards that direction. But really, what kind of really triggered me into that was that I had gone back to New York to visit my friends, and also I caught up with a cousin of mine So I remember going to his house. I saw him over the winter, but spring break or so down in Florida, and so we were talking and stuff. We're talking about music because he was in the hardcore scene in New York in like the early '80s, and I was more in the mid to late '80s, late '80s really to be exact. And so we're talking about music because he was a singer of a hardcore band, and we're talking about music and listening to music. And then I said, "Man, you sound like this group." He's like, "No, we don't sound like that. We sound like this." So he plays me this band. And I listened to it. It's not as gritty, it's not as fast, it's not even as heavy. It's kind of more slow, it's kind of more, if anybody knows music, more power chords, more twangy in a sense. And it's a British band. So, and I never knew what they were singing about, but it just, it's like you ever have in life where you watch something and you hear something, at first it didn't affect you. But then you're like, later on, you're like, wow, that was kind of good. So, I went back to Florida after that, and then, that was the last time I saw my cousin. He died that fall. He got hit by a train in Long Island Railroad, and so that was the last time I saw him. So I got back to Florida, and I started asking people about the band. The band's name was Screwdriver with a K. And so I asked people, and there was a skinhead kid. There were skinheads in my school, and so I was cool with them. So I said to this kid, and he's no longer with us, and I said, hey, his name was Steve. I said, Steve, man, you ever heard of this band Screwdriver? He's like, oh, yeah, I like them. I said, really? I said, okay. So for everybody on here who don't know, we used to have record stores. So we didn't have the internet. We couldn't download music. We had to go to a record store.
Young people like, what's that?
No. What's a record store? Records are making a comeback, I see. So it's
record store was a tape shop.
Yeah, exactly. So you go to the record store, and if you wanted something, you had to go to the owner and say, hey, excuse me, sir, I would like this band. Yeah. So he says, all right, let me see what I can do. So he gets the band. He calls me up. He gets, he got to order it. And he's like, okay, I got your record. It was right down the street from me. Go down the street, happy. He pulls it out, the record, and he pulls it out. And my face was like, what is this? On the cover, it says the band Screwdriver, but on the cover, it has a picture of a Klansman in full regalia, the horse in full regalia, with a torch burning the countryside, the album title, White Rider. So I'm like, what in the world is this? So I had to sneak this record in my house, because, I'm in a biracial family here.
Yeah,
So, I got three sisters at the time, and so I put it in my thing, walk in the house. I had a little record player in my room, put it on low, listen to it. First song is called White Rider, and it's basically giving praise to the Ku Klux Klan. Talking about how they're warriors, they're fighting for a cause. And then I hear in this other song, which ended up being kind of one of my favorites, it's talking about how the lead singer went to jail for a racial crime. So I'm just like, what is this? So it's just like I didn't know what to think, and so, but after a while you play it and you're listening and you're like, you're in a different environment. I'm bitter because my stepfather was getting high and stuff like that, having problems with the family and stuff. And it's just like, it started resonating with me. You know what I'm saying? They're talking about how the poor white man can't get a job. The Jews, and they're preventing it, and the immigrants, and black people on welfare. That's what they're talking about. You're talking about England, though. They're talking about England. And so, but it's resonated with me in America, because I'm like, yeah, man, I can't find a job. Even though I'm in high school, I want to work a part-time job. Yeah, these dirty immigrants are taking my job. So you're thinking that. So bit by bit, the music, it's like a propaganda machine. The music, you hum it. And I remember a guy saying this on a thing about the same thing we're discussing. He said, you hum the music, and then the next thing you know, you're singing the lyrics. So you're singing these lyrics, and they had some real explicit songs, man. They had songs praising Nazis, like they had a song about praising Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess was one of Hitler's top men. They had a song, they called the name of that song is called Prisoner of Peace. You know what I'm saying? They had songs, they had one song was very explicit, using, constantly using the N-word and so on and so on and so forth. And there was other bands as well that I became, listening to. They would another band that was in the same category from Britain was a band called Brutal Attack, and they had a song praising St. George, because they believed St. George was going to come and wash away all the subhumans and clean up the land of Britain. And at the same time, the same mentalities in the States. So the thing was, though, whenever I heard the racism towards black people, it never sat right with me. It never did. Even when I hung out with people and they would drop the N-word and stuff, just never sat right with me. But the thing about the immigrants really did. And I to be honest with you, I really can't understand why. Even though I did deal with some immigrants down there, you know, there'd be Latinos, there'd be Haitians and so on and so forth. I did have some bad dealings maybe, you know what I'm saying? But it just, a stereotype started developing.
Okay.
And so, you know, you listening to, I was never a part of a group or a gang. We were just a little bunch of friends hanging out, listening to music and so on and so forth. But the irony is, which is something I always have to explain to people, is that to give you a little go back a little bit, who are skinheads? The original skinheads were non-racist because they intermingled with the Jamaican Rude Boys in the late 60s in Britain. So their main music that they listened to was ska, what they called rock steady, you know, like old Bob Marley, there was groups like Desmond Decker, Toots and the Maytals, you know, stuff like that. They listened to that. It was more ska-like. But what it was that the white working class kids, they wanted to take a more working class look, you know, so they wore the Doc Marten boots, they wore, you know, Levi's, they wore, you know, bomber jackets, you know, the small suspenders, which they call braces, shaved their head to be like an antithesis to the hippies. Because, you know, in Britain they had the hippies, they had the mods, they had the rockers, they had the teddy boys. So they were like their own thing, and they looked like an army. They wanted to look like the Marines and stuff like that. You know, they rolled like that, and they fought. They were known for fighting and stuff. But what happened in the mid 70s, the punk explosion in Britain, that kind of also triggered this new skinhead. So some of them started taking up a racist mentality. They started getting with the racist organizations like the National Front in Britain. So they took on a very anti-black, very anti-immigrant, very nationalistic stance. So even in my time, there were skinheads who were racist, and then there were skinheads which we called sharp skins. They were skinheads against racial prejudice. So these were the guys who were like the traditional skinheads. They may have listened, and the music that I was listening to, come to find out a later thing, was called Oi, but it was racist. But then you had other Oi bands that weren't racist from Britain and from America. And so, and Oi is a British term. They use it for like, you know, it's like saying, when we say yo, they say Oi, they say hey, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? But it just became that name of music. So and in those non-racist skinheads, when I lived in Florida, we used, you know, you didn't express yourself with your white nationalism. Because I never called myself a white power skinhead or a neo-Nazi. I didn't like that stuff. I was more of a white nationalist. I was proud to be white, and I was proud of America. And that's how I felt. But yet, as one brother said to me one time a couple years ago, white nationalism is the gateway drug to white supremacy. And I agree with that. So
If you stay long enough, you're under transition.
You start to see it, because things start to, you know, you're fed stuff, the propaganda, you know, on and on and on.
Which also brings you back to the power of the music, right?
Of course.
You were talking about how you were listening to the music, and the music starts to shape your values and your mindset. And
that's really all it was, because I didn't know I knew a couple of people. I knew one girl down there, she was a white power skinhead girl. And I remember one time a friend of mine, and we were outside of a club down in Florida, and we meet this guy. He walks up to us, real friendly guy. He had a patch on, and we recognized the patch. It was for a group called the American Front. So, but the funny part about it was he didn't, hey, let me tell you about white revolution and this and that. No, he just talked to us. So he just really kind of let our guard down. We kicking it. Yeah. But he never really brought anything like that. I guess that was maybe for another time. Because that's what they do. They want to, like a gang member, like anybody, they want to let your guard down.
You got to see it slowly.
Exactly. So they want to, you know, but like still, you know, I still have this mentality of white nationalism. So, you listen to various bands and this and that, and you just believe it. And then one of the turning points for us as skinheads was the year 1988, because there was two very prominent shows that came out about skinheads, because it was the talk of the week. And one was Oprah. Oprah had a show in early 88, I believe it was, or either late 87 or early 88, talking about skinheads. And this is where she was interviewing some neo-Nazi skinheads from various organizations. And they were also playing some of the music from some of these bands, like specifically Screwdriver. And then the big one was Geraldo, 1988, November 1988. I remember it vividly because I'm at my girlfriend's house and we're in her room and we're watching this episode. And so on the stage, you got the neo-Nazi and white power skinheads and some who are not skinheads, like you had Tom Metzger, the head of war. You had his son, John Metzger, who was the head of the Aryan Youth Movement. And then you had on the stage, you had this guy, Bob Hike, who was the head of the American Front, and some other individuals. And in the audience, Geraldo was good. So he had the neo-Nazi white power skins over here, but then he's in New York. And New York didn't play white power. New York did not play white power. Because in New York, there was a whole array of skinheads. Black, Puerto Rican, Dominicans, whole array of skinheads. I remember, there was the Sunset Park skins in Brooklyn. They were Puerto Rican skinheads. You had a couple of Dominican skinheads. You had a couple of black skinheads, et cetera, et cetera. Because they knew that the original skinheads were multiracial. Really at that time, black and white and stuff, because it's from England. So, as we know, as history showed, the big fight erupted because John Metzger called Roy Innis, because Roy Innis was who was the head of CORE at the time. He called him an Uncle Tom. Roy Innis got up, started choking him. Big Malay. Geraldo got hit with the nose. He could have never did anything better for him because it skyrocketed him. But that just opened the door for everybody to know who we were. And then in New York, they had like a 2-night program about skinheads on Channel 7 News back in '88. So we were out there. Yeah. So much so that I remember I came to visit New York in early '89, and we broke down in a predominantly black neighborhood, and it was a bunch of us skinheads, and a couple black guys in the car. I'd say, "Yo, you guys are skinheads?" Like, "Nah, not us." Because we knew what was going to happen. Yeah, we knew where we were at. So it was kind of like, we had a target on our back. Yeah. We had a target. So it wasn't easy being that. So, but nevertheless, the funny thing about that time, and I can give you, just like I gave you the turning points to where I was this way, I give you the turning points where I saw me coming away from this mentality. Like I said, and I will reiterate.
But back at that point already, you was already like dressing.
Yeah, I had to look. I had to look. I shave my head or I grow my hair. I'd wear the whole regalia was you wore like a Fred Perry polo shirt, which I still wear because I like the style. The Doc Marten boots, which I still wear because I like the style. And you wore the jeans, or you wear a nice button-down shirt, but you wore the braces, what they call. I started getting tattoos. Especially the tattoos that mainly those skinheads would be like tattoos that were very orientated towards Vikings, because Vikings were looked at as the ultimate white warrior. You know what I'm saying? And Hitler used that. Some of these skinheads, they weren't just Christian, or what they were like, what really specifically Christian identity. And Christian identity are people who believe that the true Israelites are the white man, not Jews, not the black Israelites. The white man is the true Israelites. And so that's Christian identity, which some of them do, like, they had groups like the Aryan nations, et cetera, et cetera. But then you had other people who were Odinists, and they practiced the old Nordic religions, pagan religions, with Thor and Odin. And so that was always a big part of the skinhead culture as well. So, I got a couple of tattoos, with Vikings and this, that, and the third, because, I was like, you want to be that. You want that epitome of the white warrior. Yeah. So but bit by bit, I just it was funny because around the same time, black nationalism in hip hop was exploding around '88. Public Enemy, Boogie Down Productions, others. So the funny part about it was I would listen to Screwdriver and bands like that, but on the flip side, I'd take It Takes a Nation a Million and bump that, or Eric B. and Rakim, or Big Daddy Kane, who were both 5%ers. So,
and he was conflicted, man.
Yeah, it was. It was. Here's the thing. Just like the nation used to intermingle with the white Aryan resistance and stuff, and vice versa. Just like there's pictures of the American Nazi Party coming to a Nation of Islam rally. So
kind of supporting each other's cause, the same cause.
Yes, because they're both talking about separatism. And so, for me, I was like, wow, man, if these guys could be proud to be black, why can't I be proud to be white? So in that time, had all the kids wearing African medallions, and so I'm like, why can't we used to make like American medallions? That's what we used to do. We were trying to be, but we didn't understand. We didn't understand that there's a difference. White nationalism is not about feeling like a person you are. Like my mother explained, give you insight. I had an album by the same band, Screwdriver, and their first song was called White Power. So my mother heard it and she was like, "What is this?" And I said, "The name of the song is White Power." So what's the matter with White Power? People have Black Power. Why can't we have White Power? She said, because Black Power is not talking about a supremacy. You're over somebody. Black Power is really talking about power to all the people. And it's just like you're getting uplifting. You're getting uplifting
and making them equal along with everybody.
And it's not saying we're gonna be powerful and
wipe you out.
To hell with everybody else. Mm-hmm. But that's what White Power says. So, she explained that, and it remained in my head to this day.
Did your stepfather ever know that you had made that transition, that you would into the skin?
I don't know. That's a very good question because
kind of hid that stuff.
No, he knew it because he could see it, but he never. I don't believe he ever approached me on it, but I think it was also due to his addiction. Okay. He might have been out of sight, out of mind to that. So. How I love my sisters, you know what I'm saying? I even despite that, I still loved him, and I still had my best friends that lived in New York that were black and stuff, and I still loved them. And like I said, when I was listening to Public Enemy, I was saying if they could be proud to be black, why can't we be proud to be white? And I liked it, And then another really kind of like turning point for me was watching the movie Mississippi Burning. I remember I saw that in whenever it came out. I believe it was either 88 or 89. And me and another skinhead friend went to see it. And it hit me. It hit me hard, man. I came out of that movie like sad. I was like, yo, man. I said, this is messed up. So.
What about that old joint with Busta Rhymes in the college?
Yeah, that was over the top and corny, man. Honestly, it was very over the top. Okay. If I ever would get to Higher Learning. I can give 2 good movies that were skinhead oriented, that people want to understand the culture. And it wasn't like over the top, and it wasn't ridiculous. One would be called Romper Stomper, which which had Russell Crowe. It's about neo-Nazi skinheads in Australia, and another one would be called Made in England, and it was about the story. It's a true story of a kid who was friendless and lonely. His father died in the Falklands, and he meets some skinheads, and he starts, but they were non-racist skinheads. But one of their friends went to jail and became out in one of those, and he kind of started gravitating towards him. And then he saw that it was garbage, and he left it. So those would be 2 very accurate movies, Made in England and Romper Stomper. So, but Higher Learning, that was ridiculous. But Mississippi Burning did it to me, man. So not too long after graduation, I moved back to New York. I grew up there. I lived in Florida for barely 3 years, and so I moved back to New York. And I was still a skinhead in the beginning and stuff, but slowly but surely I just started to gravitate out of it. I still listened to some of the music. I still loved some of the, the ideas and stuff. But hip hop was really taking a thing because now I'm back in my environment, and now I'm feeling like I'm like listening to this and it's really resonating with me. So I kind of went into that direction, became more of a hip hop kid. And house kid, going to the house clubs and stuff like that. And then, I know people can't picture. Yeah, I know. I wasn't a dancer, so I'm not even going to try to play that game. So, but I loved that environment. And, and being with my multiracial friends, I had a whole different group of friends. And so I started like that. And then it's always like one way brings you to another way. And then I started reading, because hip hop was talking a lot about Malcolm X and their idea of Islam, it started causing me to be curious. And at the same time, since I was a little kid, there was a brother who was real close with my stepfather. He grew up with him. And he was the imam of a masjid in Wyandanch, New York. And he would come by often. He even left the Quran with my mother and stepfather because he was trying to teach them. And he said that one day he came and he saw it was kind of like not taken care of, and he was about ready to take it back, but he cleaned it, put it back up. And I remember one time I just asked him some questions, and he seemed like, oh, okay. But I really didn't go back to that. And then I was reading, like I said, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that really like, wow, this is what's up. I like this because I was for many years I was an agnostic. I was raised a Catholic, but I was an agnostic. I was looking. Yeah. So I said, wow, this is good, And then what happened was I was still looking into Islam in all the wrong places. Yes, I'm white, but I'm looking at the 5%ers. I'm looking at the nation, and I'm looking at the Ansar Allah. And so it was funny. One day I'm coming from
Ansar Allah was big in New York.
Yeah. Well, they were coming to the end, probably around early 90s. They were, that's when, the good old Dr. York, was transitioning to the Nuwabians and then to this and then to that, and he's in jail where he should be, and that's where I'm glad he is. But there was some, guys that I met on the train coming from a hardcore show one night, and they were part of this one hip hop group called KMD from Long Island, and and they were Ansar. So I'm asking them questions and stuff, and they sound like, they made it sound all good. Then what happened was, even so much so, their look was that they pierced their right nostril and their left ear. So I did that. I was trying to go towards that. Then my friend comes back from Jamaica Avenue one day. He said, Jeremy, man, I don't know about this. Yeah. He brings me a book by Dr. York called The Pale Man. And basically, as the 5% nation believed that a big-headed scientist made white people, well, Dr. York, he had I got to give him this. He had a more plausible theory about how white people came about from leprosy. But it was a little more, you didn't have a big-headed scientist. It was a little more, it was funny because I remember there was the group Third Base. You remember Third Base? And they said a disease created by leprosy. And he was basically dissing himself. I'm like, this guy's a fool, man. And so, but I realized, I said, this ain't Islam. So I saw the brother, his name, once again, his name Sheikh Inshira. And may Allah preserve him. I speak to him every day, man. This brother is he's like a father figure to me. And so I said, Inshira, what is this? And he's like, man, that's not Islam. He said, come to he would do, at the masjid, they would do a Sunday halaqah from, Dhuhr to whatever. He said, come to the masjid on Sunday and I'll teach you what Islam is. So that was September or October 91. So bit by bit I was meeting brothers, but I didn't take my shahada. So months, a few months, 4 months gone by, we come into the new year, 92. I'm just a little over 20, January of 92. So one time he's over in England doing something, and the assistant imam was his brother, and may Allah forgive him and grant him Jannah to Firdaus, Ameen. This brother, Sheikh Ihsan Abdul Aziz, big brother, old school brother, man, ex-Panther, the guy who tell you how it is, and I loved him for that because I'm like that, So one day he's giving the halaqah because the imam is gone, and I didn't know what he said at first, but then I took shahada. I said, this is it. So I said, Shahadu an la ilaha illallah wa shahadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Took the shahada. Sometime later I asked him, I said, Sheikh, what was it that you said that made me go and say, I want to take my shahada now? So he said, what I said was, for the non-Muslim, they get the good of this world. But for the Muslim, they get the good of this world and in the hereafter. And that was it. So, alhamdulillah, January 1992, I transitioned in that way. And it was funny because there were people who were like, this is just another phase Jeremy going through. He's just going through it. He'll get out of it. But
going through some stuff.
Yeah, but 27 years later, alhamdulillah, I've been Muslim. Alhamdulillah, man, Allah has kept me on the path. And after myself, then my stepfather took shahada 6 months later. And then 1 year later, my mother took shahada. And now, alhamdulillah, man, I'm married for 21 years coming April. And between my wife and I, we have 5 kids. So I'm blessed by this because Islam is definitely the thing that saved me. Because in my past, there were people that I grew up with, even after being a skinhead, man, they're dead from drug abuse. They're dead from criminality. They're in jail. And I just didn't want to do that no more. Because even after my whole skinhead thing, I was still going to shows, getting into fights, getting in trouble with people. And there was times when things were real close. Yeah. But alhamdulillah, Allah protected me.
And I think environment, man, is key, man, as well, man, because I can tell you, back in early 90s, my cousins had moved up to PA, Kingston, Pennsylvania. They were, I think, the only Latinos in the whole town.
Okay.
So I used to go up frequently to go visit them. You know what I mean? So it's just a town of white kids, man.
Yeah.
And I remember, man, we would go out, man, and we walking down the street late at night. Car go by, like, you spick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? they yell at us like, "Yo, what's good?"
Yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
What's what I do? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Alhamdulillah, my cousin had some respect because he could fight.
Yeah.
His brother could fight. His sister could fight.
Yeah.
They would come out of school and they were brawling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the racism was real, man.
Of course.
It was real, man, and we felt it out there. You know what I'm saying? And so we used to go party in the hood.
Yeah.
With the African Americans.
Yeah,
because, you know what I mean? The next town over where they was from, anytime coming over, we, you know what I mean? You kind of had to have weapons, stuff like
Yeah.
that, because you never knew what the heck was going to happen
Yeah.
because of the racism, man. You know what I mean? And you never know how things are going to transfer, man. But you know, an important point that you made, man, and maybe it could be a transition point for us, is that when you were talking about the skinheads, you mentioned that, you know, some have that racist aspect and some don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to note.
Yes.
Because especially with the climate that we're in now,
Yeah.
you don't want individuals to kind of just generalize and think that everybody's the same based on
course.
what happened in New Zealand.
It's kind of like Muslims, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like Muslims, you know what I'm saying? Everybody think because what we look like, they think we this or that.
Everybody's an Osama.
Yeah, like people used to call me after 9/11 because they saw me, you know, with the big beard and stuff. They call me Mini Osama, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, stuff like that because, you know, that's what it is. So it's very important. A lot of times you could tell. Here's the thing by back in the day, how we could tell. Sometimes in the Doc Martens, when we call DMs, they would have certain laces.
Okay.
And that would tell you kind of what their mentality was. Like I used to wear white laces, and that kind of was like specifying white nationalism.
Okay.
And the red laces meant white power. So if you wore some black Doc Martens and you had red laces, that could mean you were a white power skinhead. Like me and some brothers, we went to England back in '99, and we were walking. I saw a skinhead, and he had Doc Martens with black, you know, with the laces. And I said to the brother, this guy's white power. He said, how you know? I said, the laces. Now, some people might just be ignorant.
Yeah.
But they always kind of like, there was always little things to tell. The tattoos. You know, there was an incident down in Florida. I was not there. It was in '88 when I was up in New York. There was an incident where some neo-Nazis came down from Tampa to Miami. And in Miami, same situation. Cuban skinheads. There was even an Arab skinhead. Yeah, this guy, and come to find out later that my friend told me that they sound like they were Muslim because his sister was named Aisha. So there was a black skinhead girl. Honestly, the best fight I ever seen was between a black skinhead girl and a white power skinhead girl. Best fight I ever seen. Best. These girls put on the gloves and they knuckled up in the alley. And it was that I was like, wow. You know, but here's the story though. So these guys came from Tampa. Guy took off his shirt and he had the Iron Eagle on his back. That's the eagle holding the swastika. Like New York City, you don't play that. So they came up on him, they stuck him and broke the knife off into him. The bouncers allowed that and everything. And then even so much so the story goes, and I don't know how true it is because I wasn't there, that even when they were driving, they cut in front of the ambulance to slow it down. And then there was one point where they were supposed to be coming back down, and I was at the show, but they never showed. So this is so there you go. There was a real deep-seated hatred that the anti-racist skinheads had towards the racist skinheads, and it's kind of like reflective today in what, though they may not be skinheads on both sides, you have what they call the alt-right, and they call it Antifa, and they hate each other. They fight on the streets.
You feel like they're diluting the movement.
Yeah, you know, and so like really what the Antifa is about is they're against the fascists. You know what I'm saying? They're more like communists. You know, they're like, you know, multiracial and stuff. But they look at like these alt-right guys. You know that, you know, they're under Trump. They promote white nationalism. They really promote white supremacy, et cetera, et cetera. They come in this disguise. You know, they're more palatable for us now. So that's really, it's kind of like that today. So
tell us a little bit about that in terms of like, how do we look at the white supremacy that exists today, especially right now in the heightened environment that we're living in, seeing this attack that took place by this individual in New Zealand, and you know, even reading his manifesto a little bit, man. You know what I mean? You know, one of the key things that he was mentioning is that, you know, his goal is to get rid of the invaders.
Yeah.
Right. And even more so, he said that, you know, the convert is most hated to him.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, the convert is most hated to him, and that he wants to get rid of the invaders, and he wanted this to be like a kickoff that kind of spurs on a reaction so that the movement could jump into movement. You know what I mean? Because people can start moving into what they want to do in terms of trying to carry out these murders and attacks and things of that nature.
Well, their main thing is they do their thing to be seen a man, because they want to be martyrs. They want to be martyred. They want to be recognized. They want to be praised. They want to have songs written about them. You know, I give you two instances. There's an individual named Robert Matthews. He was one of the heads of a group called the Order. They were a terrorist organization in the early 80s. And basically there was a shootout with the feds. He was martyred. So now his certain date where they have celebrations of his martyrdom. Then you have the singer of the band Screwdriver I mentioned. He is they are looked at as the godfathers of white power rock music. He died in a car crash. So every year they have a thing celebrating his life. So what they do is they want to spur people on to do these things. They want to trigger them to, they want to show them, get them sparked. And what they like to do is they say, hey, they're lone wolves. They're not representative of us. But who taught them? And so, these guys, in their hierarchy of hate, I know back in the day, it was like what they call with the race traitor is on the top of their list. Before the Jews, before black people, before Asians, before this, because they look as the worst of the worst.
So this would be a convert.
Yeah, and a convert would be and also a man like me whose wife is African American and who's raised by a black man. So I'm the top of the cream of the crop for them. Yeah, and that's how it's looked, and so that's why they these people like to pretend they're not they like to change words and pretend they're not holding neo-Nazi philosophy, but they are. And the thing is that this is nothing new. We know this. Like in the 80s, there was a rise of white supremacy. In the 90s, there was a rise of white supremacy. You saw different things that were occurring during the Clinton era. But what really kind of was the turning point was Obama being president. It kind of sparked it. Now, they didn't come out like they did now, but they were waiting for the signal. They were waiting for it to come. And what were they doing? They were calling him a Kenyan. What would they do? Calling him a Muslim. What would they do? They call him this, they call him that. They were sitting in the shadows a little bit still. But once, Trump came, he gave legitimacy to this movement. Because you'll never condemn them. When Charlottesville happened, we have good people on both sides. There is no such thing as a good Nazi. Sorry. In my opinion, the only good Nazi is a dead Nazi. That's my opinion. And he has people in his office that promote white supremacist ideologies. Steve Bannon. He has the other guy, which ironically enough, Stephen Miller, who ironically enough is Jewish. But he promotes white supremacist mentality. So,
and how many of these groups are anti-Islam? Because I know when I was reading the manifesto too, one of his things was saying that the Muslims like to have a lot of babies.
Yeah.
So he's like, these people they procreating too fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we got to start getting rid of them. You know what I mean? So he was saying that especially now, he was basically he was saying the iron is hot.
Yeah.
Because he said that the masjids are packed.
Yep.
On Fridays. You know what I mean? He said that there's basically a lot of opportunity to now go ahead and start. Killing off, these large groups of individuals. Man.
Well, look at us, man. Alhamdulillah, man, we listen to what Allah says and have children to bring more into this ummah. See, European people ain't having kids. European descent people, man, they're having kids when they're in their 40s. They're having kids. They have 2 kids. Then they get the guy will get a vasectomy, and then the woman will get a tubes tied. They're not having kids because they're fearful. But we know we want to see the ummah grow. So they're not using that philosophy. So what they're doing is they want to find ways. See, that's why they don't even care about if it's children or not, because they look at them as a potential. See, they're looking at it as a danger in the future. You know what I'm saying? That's why you have the situation with the young boy, 3 years old. 3 years old. What kind of human kills a 3-year-old boy? What kind of devil does that? But see, they don't care because they're devils. That's what they are. They're Hizbu Shaitan. They're the followers of Shaitan. Because we always will remember who was the first racist, who was the first bigot. Shaitan. I'm better than him. I made a smokeless fire. He's made of clay. So this is what they're found. They're Hizbu Shaitan. They may not be Satanists, but they're following it. So this is the kind of individual that they are, man. And once again, I can't say Trump is the founder of this, but he sure is their facilitator right now.
Connection somewhere.
Yeah.
And what's some of the propaganda, man, that Muslims and people can start to look out for, that kind of gives them a sign of who these individuals are and all outside of that, because you walk down the street, man, really you're ignorant, you don't know what to look for, like you was mentioning, you got the red versus the white shoelace. I mean, it's almost like with any gang, Crips and the Bloods, you got Crips walking around with red, the Bloods walking around with blue, you know what I mean? But now the whole thing with white supremacy, man, since it's not a group of people on a corner hanging out, we don't really have any indicators.
Well, there are certain indicators. For me, and this is my opinion, I'll just bring my opinion. The whole Blue Lives Matter flag, to me, is the modern day rebel flag. Because basically this whole movement came about when black people were saying, look, you're killing us. The cops are killing us. Stop killing us. Our lives matter. What did the police say? No, blue lives matter. Because you're supposedly they're getting killed off. But so it's kind of like, that's, in my opinion, the new rebel flag of today. And there's also another thing I've seen of late, not of late, but of recent years. There's a group called the 3 Percenters. And this is like a group that they're very strict constitutionalists. They believe that they got to fight for their land. Don't tread on me, don't tread on me. Even though back in the day that wasn't used as that. Don't tread on me is kind of like a symbol now of the white supremacist alt-right. The 3 Percenters are the 3 Percenters were the group that went and protested that masjid down in Arizona a year or two ago. And so they're all in New York. You go, they're in New Jersey. All you gotta do is look on a car. You'll see a 3%. They'll take 3 Roman numerals. And then there's also a thing. There's a Latin term which I don't know what it means, but you'll see like a Roman helmet, and it says Moan something, and it's a kind of a symbol that these guys are using of late. And then they use the Punisher symbol, and sometimes, which is very cute, they'll put in the Punisher symbol in Arabic, kafir. It's really cute, because they're just identifying themselves. Yeah. So this is what they do. These guys are very, they're very strong constitutionalists. They're about, they're always connected with the Second Amendment people in a sense. Got to have our guns. But yet, if we have the incident in Florida where the guy said, no Muslims in Ocala, no Muslims. And these same people try to roll on a masjid in Ocala. And alhamdulillah, some of our brothers came and stopped that. So these are what we got to look for. The skinheads, I really don't see skinheads like I used to. But there's like, there's certain people that have certain ways, the way they dress. There's a group called the Proud Boys. They got into a big fight in the city recently. And, you'd see a picture of Roger Stone, Trump's guy, the one who got arrested, peace symbol, got the Nixon tattoo on his back. Here's a picture of him in the thing with them, and they're all throwing up the new white power symbol. It's like this. This represents the W, and this represents the P. It's a white power symbol. Don't think it means okay. It means it instead of doing the old Sieg Heil and stuff like that, they do this now. Yeah. And if you notice,
that's why people say no, it means okay.
No, it don't mean okay. It means white power.
Sign language.
See, they use a lot of Masonic ways of doing things, but that's what it means. And also, the 3 could mean Ku Klux Klan and stuff like that. So they have a lot of symbolisms,
And then the relevance of this attack with the past, because especially his gun being tagged up with things. Yeah. You know what I mean? What's the relevance? Well,
the relevance is he basically, he tagged people's names that have fought against Islam. But the thing that, because there was a post on Facebook that was talking about this, but there was 2 things that they kind of missed. And one thing which was prolific on the rifle was the number 14. And that is very important in the white supremacist neo-Nazi community, because it means we must preserve the... you're gonna have to forgive me. I always forget. I got it in my notes. Basically, what it means is we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. That's what the number 14 means. And also, they use other numbers. Let me give you some of the examples. 88, because it's the 8th letter, Heil Hitler. 18, Adolf Hitler. 28, Blood Nana, because Blood Nana is a old German Nazi phrase. They used to have them on their knives and stuff like that. And it's also a group of neo-Nazis out of England. They're called Blood Nana. 38 Confederate hammerskins. And then there's a word called Rahawa, which means racial holy war. So these are certain phraseologies and symbolisms. They got many symbolisms. They have what they call, some of them are the Celtic cross, which is a circle with a cross in it. That's used as a white power symbol. Obviously, the swastika. They have various derivatives of the swastika. They also use other Odinist symbols. They use the death helmet, which was with the Nazi, like the SS and stuff like that. So this is what they do. It's a real shock. They want, some people like even say like the spider web on the elbow. Some people I know had spider webs, weren't Nazis and stuff, meant you killed somebody, a black person or something like that. So some people do this, some people don't. And there's like, these organizations, man, you have various groups that are, this methodology, be it bikers, be it everyday middle class people. You got, working class people, college kids. There's like, a lot of these college kids, they're fed up in their mind with affirmative action and this liberal organization and that. But we as Muslims became a real target after 9/11. And the thing is, they're trying their utmost to try to stop Islam and the Muslims. However they can. The thing is that Muslims are totally oblivious to what's going on here. I have to say this, and I say this honestly. I have yet to meet somebody who knows what I know about this, and it's a shame. But it took New Zealand to have people have a real big interest in it now, and only I've been on this for at least 20 years. And trying to push it to people, get people. And alhamdulillah, there's a handful of people who listen to me, including my wife. But many people, and she heard it enough. She's like, "Oh, okay, that's enough. I heard it." You know what I'm saying? But alhamdulillah, that's what you want in a wife. That that you're saying something that people are listening. But alhamdulillah, there are people listening now. Now, and I'm going to say this: you're listening, you're knowing. You got to be prepared. There's no going back. There is no going back. They have drew the blood. Now, what we as Muslims, it's funny. I was given an interview by a Turkish publication about this, and they were like, "What do you think they want you to do? What do you think what kind of or something like what reaction?" I said, "We got to defend ourselves. I believe in self-defense. I believe in taking care of ourselves. I come from the school of Malcolm X. Malcolm said, if somebody comes to harm you, you send them to the cemetery. And I agree with that. But, he said, well, isn't that what they want? This is what he said in self-defense. I said, no. What they want is for Muslims to overreact and start doing terrorism. That's what they want. They want Muslims to go and say, oh, you did this to us? Now we're going to go do this to a church. La. This is against Islam. You don't do that. And this is the problem I have with groups, that these so-called Muslim organizations. You're going around killing Muslims in this. Where are you? Just like where are the Bloods and the Crips? Where are the Latin Kings and the MS-13? Where are all these individuals to go against white supremacists? They're killing people left and right. Where are they? They're nowhere. They're playing checkers while they're playing chess. They're preparing on a regular basis. They're going in the woods unchecked and training, shooting. They got the best of arms, the best of abilities. And here we are, we're afraid to say anything. We're afraid. But we got to get out of that mentality. We got to get up and we got to defend ourselves, our families, our children, our elders, our imma, our masajid, our madrasa, all of them. We got to do that because we have a right. And I don't care what the state says. I'm talking about what Allah says. That's what our right is. And so this is why I'm glad, we're getting this out now. Maybe it's not too late. It's not too late.
No, and it's like, we gotta, FBI, CIA, everybody's always recording.
Yep.
We record, you record,
yep.
It's all good. Alhamdulillah. This is why we put it out there so inshallah it goes viral.
Ameen.
And people know, what actually came from our mouths. what Brother Yusuf said, defense is of utmost importance. You know, I tell my wife all the time, Jersey doesn't have a self-defense law.
Yeah.
I said, but I'll be fine sitting in prison.
Of course.
As long as I know my wife and my children are safe.
Of course.
You know what I mean? As long as I know my community is safe.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I was able to stop something from happening to them. At least they get to come visit me.
That's right.
I don't got to go visit them in the graveyard.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And that's what's key, right? We're not talking about, like you mentioned, we're not talking about going and harming churches or
Nope.
synagogues.
Goes against Islam.
Anything. Islam is not about that. Islam is about the preservation of life, right? And guarding that life. So, you know, any last words, man?
Yeah, I want to give a few statistics to to kind of make you all aware of this. You know, I'm going to give you a few statistics. And this is a very good site that I started following, and I suggest anybody on here to follow. Is called the Southern Poverty Law Center. You know, they get sometimes they get a little bit of flack. You know, everybody's flawed. Only all perfection is with Allah. But however, they got some good statistics. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, in 2018, there are 1,020 hate groups in America. 1,020 hate groups. In 2017, this is 2018, excuse me, 2018. In 2017, there were 917 hate groups. So it jumped up to 103 more groups. And in that, 101 groups are anti-Muslim, and that was since 2015. Now, here's the frightening figure. In 1996, there were only 457 groups.
So it's more than doubled.
It went up, the statistic, 197%. And so, according to the groups in 2017, 47 in New York, the DC, Maryland area, 18, where we are now in New Jersey, 15, and in PA, 40, and Connecticut, 5. And like I said, you know, here's some of the names of some of the groups that are particularly anti-Muslim. The Three Percenters, they are American Patriot Movement, which pledges resistance against the U.S. government regarding what it believes to be infringement of the Constitution. Okay? We have Act for America. We see that broad Brigitte Gabriel, the Arab, their little token Arab, who lies against Allah and his Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is another movement. Then you have the American Freedom Defense Initiative. It's the Stop Islamization of America. This is Pamela Geller. She's kind of been quiet since she can't really get her voice out.
She's been real quiet.
Because Trump is doing his job for her.
Yeah.
Then you got the Bureau of on American Islamic Relations. These are the guys who armed themselves in Texas and were in Dallas protesting in front of the Masjid Arm. This is that group. And then you got Jihad Watch, which he's also kind of quiet, Robert Spencer. And you also have the website of David Horowitz, the Freedom Center. And he's like, these are, you know, a financial backer as well. So these are just the anti-Muslim groups. I mean, there's neo-Nazi groups, there's alt-right groups, there's skinhead groups, there's just there's anti-immigrant groups. You know, there's, you know, and what they always like to do to throw in there just to be on the safe side is throw the black identity movements. You know what I'm saying? Like they're really committing much compared to them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and it's crazy too because you never know where they're at.
Yeah.
You know, just Friday, or the day of the attack in New Zealand, one of the police officers here in town, he actually was like, "Listen, you know, New Jersey is one of the places ripe for the hate groups." He was like, "You won't believe it." He said, "Here in the town where we're at right now," he said, which is about 90% Latino. He said, "You know what I mean?" He said, "You have the groups who come into town, you know what I mean, and people don't even know it, you know what I mean, then they do stuff." He said, "I'll give you, for instance," he said I think he said 2015 or something like that. He said, "You go downtown," he said, "where it's all black and Latino."
Yeah.
He said, one of the cops got a call, went into one of the bars. He said the entire bar was full of white supremacist jokers.
Wow.
He said the cops stepped back out without being seen, closed the door, called the headquarters, called for backup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They had to come down in full force
Yeah.
because they didn't know what was going to transpire. Was these guys planning something? You know what I'm saying? They were in there getting drunk. What was going to happen afterwards? You know what I mean? Because, you know, they were in a location where it was prime for targets. You know what I mean? So he was like, you know, you may think that you're safe.
No.
He said, because where you at, he said, but the reality is, you got to keep your eyes open, you got to keep your ears open, and, you know, your head on the swivel.
Well, see, the thing is, I remember reading an article some years back about a guy, and I don't know whatever happened to him. He accepted Islam, and he was a former Klan member. And he would talk about how they would go into predominantly black areas and shoot somebody or do this or that. But then the police would just identify it as a black on black crime, because that's what they could do. Because see, the police ain't doing what their job is. They're not helping secure these neighborhoods. So when somebody can get away like that, you can make it look like whatever you want. So this is what's happening. You know what I'm saying? So they'll come in and create problems, and do it just to stir it up, because they want to be looked at as the victims. Oh, look at me! I got attacked by these guys. Oh, you know what I'm saying? And see, that's their little trick that they play. So when they go march in England, you got various anti-Muslim groups: Britain First, the English Defence League. Then you got all the skinhead organizations, there. But then when they'll march, and then alhamdulillah, a lot of the Muslims over there don't play that game. They'll fight. They'll defend their masajid. But over here, man, we got to get out of this mentality that we got to love them. We beat them with love. That's not how it works, man. We have to defend our lives and our property. We're allowed by Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are a few statistics, and that's the only thing which will help them. That's the only thing. Like they were talking about this guy. I love him and this, that, and the third. I'm like, yo, man. Only, and I believe you said it. Only if he accepts Islam, that's it. Other than that, I hope some of these New Zealand gangsters get to him.
More than that, in his manifesto, he actually says, if I'm alive in 27 years to actually get out of prison, he said, because more than likely I'm going to be killed in prison.
Yeah.
Because he already knows.
He knows.
He knows that there's no way that he's not going to come across,
yep.
Someone in prison,
yeah,
that's not going to be pleased with what he did and going to try to say
But see, that's the whole thing. He wants to be a martyr.
Yeah.
And that's
even though he claims no.
Yeah, no.
Even though he claims no, he was like, no, I'm trying to, my whole purpose is to reignite the movement. And I wasn't really looking for martyrdom. He said, but if it would have came, I'd have took it. He said, but it's crazy. It's a 74-page manifesto. I think, community leaders need to read it. They need to be, on point with what's happening, the mindset that's being created.
Yes.
And be diligent in finding ways on how to protect your masjid, your people, and your family has to be ready. I'll give you in closing, I'll give you an example. I was in the hospital maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, because my father-in-law was alive. Actually took him to the hospital that night. And we're in the emergency room in the back. So I'm with me, my wife, my father-in-law, and I start hearing over the loudspeaker code 60. I come from the streets.
Yeah.
So when I keep hearing code 60, I'm saying, yo, something's going on.
Yeah.
In the hospital.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I sit up and I'm getting ready, yo, what's happening? All of a sudden I see the nurse and I'm being vigilant. The nurse, she picks up the phone and she's dialing with urgency.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden she turns around, she's like, ah! And I see this guy, he just looks like he's just drugged out.
Yeah.
Tall, big white dude, he's just coming. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, move. Let's go. I looked at my wife, my father-in-law, move. Y'all stay behind me, move.
Yeah.
And I start moving.
Yeah.
I got the guy in front as I'm crossing take my family to the exit.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I'm like, yo, where's my wife? I look over there, she's stuck frozen in the corner. My father like this. And I'm like, what you doing?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah,
move,
yeah,
move.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm trying to make sure I get you out safe. If I got to jump and get into it with the dude, I ain't got no problem with that. But at least I know you can get the door and get out. You know what I mean? And this is what's, it's important for the Muslims, to be prepared at that level now.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate, but this is the world that we live in presently, and if we don't prepare, we may pay. Yeah,
it's like you said, you have to have your head on a swivel. You got to be vigilant. You got to look at things. You got to see things. You got to read things. One thing, alhamdulillah, from my growing up on the streets as well, is that I'm able to see things, and I'll say to my wife, I said, look at that. You know what I'm saying? I say, and she's like, what is that? And I said, just, or she'll see me, and I'll change something about me. You know what I'm saying? How I deal with things, or my stance, or this or that. You know what I'm saying? Because you prepare, and that's what you got to do. Like, you got to watch and be careful of who's coming around. See if you're at your masjid and you see somebody going around and going around and going around, then you got to get a license plate. You got to know, but you also got to be prepared, because guess what? The police ain't always going to protect you, because unfortunately, there are reports on this. Many of these in the military, many of these in police are in white supremacist groups. So we gotta understand that. Everybody, I'm not saying every cop is bad. I'm not saying that. However, there are a lot of white supremacists that have infiltrated, and this was something that they taught.
Can't ignore that fact.
No, and this was something that they spoke about in the '80s to how to get mainstream. Take off take off that garb and get into the mainstream. Get into the police. I remember years ago reading about how many, that there'd be racist graffiti in Iraq from the Aryan nations and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? Just like there was gang graffiti, because this is what they did. They say, well, we're gonna take advantage of this. Not only we're gonna learn, hone our skills. We're gonna kill some of these undesirables so they don't come here. That's what they look at it. See, this is a lack of humanity, man. And I pray that we, as Muslims, could be aware and that we wake up. That's my thing. And and also, for anybody on here, say who needs more information, et cetera, feel free to contact the Imam Abu Sumayya, and he'll contact me and give you, because I want to get this out, because there's so much. This right here, this is just a folder of stuff in here, man. That needs to be this is it. We got to be prepared. So I hope that people will really be more vigilant and more understanding of the danger of white supremacist groups and individuals.
Absolutely. With that being said, it's another episode, Abu Sumayya's Corner, where we keep it real, 100%. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.